Thank you for being here. I want to thank Congressman Newhouse, Congressman Carbajal, and Congressman Valadeo for being here today. The leaders from United Farm Workers, including my friends Arturo Rodriguez and Teresa Romero, Chuck Connor from the National Council of Farm Cooperatives, and Rebecca Shee from the American Business Immigration Council. We are all here this morning with a simple message. Next week is our best opportunity to address the labor crisis in American agriculture, and I would say maybe our last best chance to save family farms in this country. And all of us have come together around a targeted, common sense proposal to do just that. Our proposal responds to three urgent and related challenges. First, America's farmers and ranchers don't have enough workers. That's what I heard from Robert Zakata, a vegetable farmer in Brighton, Colorado. When Robert visited my office, he handed me flyers advertising his farm equipment. And I asked Robert, why are you selling your equipment? Why are you selling your implements? And he said it was because he didn't have enough labor to harvest the crops. Today, they don't even grow vegetables anymore at Zakata Farms, only row crops. I hear stories like that all across Colorado, and I've heard them for the last decade, and everybody here knows why that's happening. If you look at which chart we have, since 2012, the cost of farm labor has gone up nearly 50%, much more than other workers in the economy. And if we don't give growers certainty, we're going to see a lot of them go out of business entirely. At the same time, we have hundreds of thousands of undocumented workers living in the shadows in this economy. And these are people who are working every single day to feed the American people. We wouldn't have an agriculture economy if it weren't for these people that are living in the shadows. People like Lulu Guerrero, who lives in Weld County, Colorado. She gets up at 3 a.m. every morning to plant watermelons, onions, tomatoes, and pumpkins. She's been doing that for 20 years without status, without protections, with no legal recourse if someone takes advantage of her. The status quo is terrible for workers, and it's terrible for growers, and it's terrible for families who have seen their grocery bills shoot up. As you can see, in the past year, grocery prices are up almost 12%, faster than at any time in the last 40 years. Apples are up 7.4%, milk almost 15%, potatoes 16%, eggs 49%. And you can draw a straight line from these higher prices and the crisis of farm labor. And we're here because nobody up here and the people that we represent back home can accept the status quo. And we have a plan to fix it, the Affordable and Secure Food Act. Our proposal builds on the legislation that our colleagues in the House passed last year. I congratulate them for the strong bipartisan vote they had on a really significant piece of legislation. And the newer version that we've been working on with the people behind me increases the number of H-2A visas and opens the program up to year-round jobs for the first time ever. It creates wage certainty for farmers to protect them from harmful swings in labor costs. Under this plan, farmers would save $23 billion over the next 12 years and over $2 billion more in the version that we're here to talk about today than in the House version. It creates a mandatory E-Verify system for farm workers nationwide. And finally, it establishes legal protections and a pathway for undocumented workers to apply for a green card after they've worked in agriculture in this country for 10 years. That's not amnesty. That's a recognition that anybody who's spent decades working to feed America should have the opportunity to apply for lawful status. This plan is broadly supported by farmers, by labor, by immigration advocates and business. There's no reason that we shouldn't get this done. And we all know what's going to happen if we don't. More farmers and ranchers are going to go out of business. More farm workers will remain in the shadows, living with fear and uncertainty in the country they feed every single day with the sweat of their labor. And more families will have to make impossible choices between groceries and the rent, medicine, or school supplies for their kids. If Congress can't get this done, it would not only be a massive missed opportunity, but a dereliction of our duty to the American people to the rural economy in this country, and to agriculture. We have to get this done. So I'm going to stop there and turn it over to Congressman Newhouse from Washington State, who led the effort in the House, and unlike most people in this chamber, actually is a farmer and therefore knows what he's talking about. Congressman Newhouse.
Thank you. At least about some things. But thank you very much for that introduction, Senator. And let me just say thank you for all of your work to get us to this point today. You've been the tremendous leader in the Senate. So as you know, I'm a member of Congress, absolutely, but more importantly, I'm a farmer from Central Washington. And so the issues that we're talking about here, I actually live on a daily basis, and so do my neighbors, and so do my constituents. You know, we're here, as you know, because for years, the agricultural industry in our country has been struggling due to a lack of labor. And now, coincidentally, Americans are paying the highest food prices that they've paid almost ever. Partly, you know, all the inputs are going up. Every input you can think of is getting scarcer and more expensive. And one of those important inputs is the human input of labor. It truly is not something that should be so difficult. It's not rocket science to figure out how we can have an adequate labor force that's legal. Without that, you know what's going to happen? Our crops will go unharvested, and our already very delicate food supply chain will be placed at further risk. That's why I and many of my colleagues in the House, Republican and Democrat, introduced the Farm Workforce Modernization Act. And let me just correct the senator. It was passed twice in the House in two different Congresses to address these labor shortages and ensure that we not only have a reliable workforce, but a legal workforce, which is, as you just heard, it's better for the workers, better for the farmers, and it's better for our country. And by ensuring that, we can ensure that we have a food supply. We can secure that food supply. We can strengthen our national security, because it truly is a national security issue. We can reduce food costs, which, as I just said, are up dramatically. And we can raise wages, reduce unemployment, not just for farm workers, but for all Americans who are involved in creating value-added upstream American products. So today, the Senate will introduce a version of our bill, which we're very excited about that. And we thank them very much for their hard work for, and you don't have to print this, for finally getting to this point. Because their title is adequately and accurately named, because that's what this is about. If our farmers don't have the labor they need to get the job done, then we will not have grocery store shelves that have the options for us to purchase. When we're in the midst of a labor crisis, let me ask a rhetorical question. Why would we not pass labor reform? When we're in the midst of a food crisis, why would we not implement changes to keep Americans fed? And when we're in the midst of an inflationary crisis like we are, why would we wait to lower food and production costs that Americans are desperate for? So I think, and I've said this many, many times, it's past time for us to deliver solutions and quit giving Americans empty promises, not only to American citizens, but to our farmers, our ranchers, and most importantly, our farm workers. So let's stop waiting, start acting. And I'm just very happy that we are at this point today. We need to reform our broken immigration laws, and this is a huge step, and ensure that those who wish to pursue a legal pathway or come to our country to contribute to our American agricultural industry can do that legally. We can protect our communities. We can strengthen our national security. This is a big part of securing our southern border, which is key, but also recognize the contributions of immigrants. and bolster our local economies, our producers, and our small businesses. So let's secure our food supply and ensure American families, as you just heard, can afford the groceries that they need to feed their families. And it's with reforms like this that we can finally do all of those things and provide a lasting solution for farms and farm workers. So thank you very much. With that, I'd like to introduce next on to the microphone my good friend, fellow farmer from the state of California, David Valadao. David.
Thanks, Dan. Well, good morning, everyone. I'll be brief because both Senator Bennet and Dan Newhouse, Congressman Newhouse, made a lot of great arguments for this bill. As a farmer, I understand the importance of this. This is something, obviously, we've known for years that has to get resolved. When we look at the border that's going on right now, and I know that's a reason used by a lot to not support legislation to solve our problems, but us solving some of the visa issues, some of the guest worker programs will relieve pressure on the border. This is a way of us helping the situation there. And coming up with common sense legislation is important, and this is one that's been in the process for a period of time. It's got bipartisan support, but it's also got support across the industries as well. Our ag groups across, especially my state of California, do support it, and across the nation, so does UFW standing here behind me. It's not very often you get this many groups in the same room together, negotiating, having conversations, and solving problems. And this is one of the few times that we have the opportunity to do it. I know we're coming up on the end of the year, and it's crunch time, but it's important that we do this, and it's important that we move forward. So again, I want to thank my colleagues, both Senator Bennet and Congressman Newhouse, for their leadership on this. It's too important for us to not move forward on this. So I appreciate the time. Now I get to introduce my friend and colleague from California, Congressman Salud Carbajal, neighboring district, also a big ag district, and one of the ones that we rely on for many of our wonderful fruits and vegetables across the country. So thanks.
Thank you. Let me start by thanking Senator Bennet for your leadership in continuing to ring the bell and the sense of urgency. I also want to thank my colleagues, Mr. Newhouse and Mr. Valadao and Representative Lofgren, who in the House, not once, but as Mr. Newhouse said, twice, have moved the Farm Workforce Modernization Act, which is the foundation of the legislation that we're considering now. I have a unique perspective. The number one industry in my district is agriculture. I understand the needs and the challenges, especially the labor needs, the water, all the issues that our farmers face every day because I represented them in local government and now in Congress. I also have the distinction of being the son of a farm worker. I joined my father many of summers working in the fields, different commodities, strawberries, tomatoes, cucumbers, onions. I know what it's like working in the fields. This is an important piece of legislation. It's been bipartisan in the House. We see it coming together in a bipartisan fashion in the Senate. It's imperative we move it forward to both allow those that live in the shadows that are providing extraordinary essential work, as we now have come to understand even better in light of the pandemic. Essential work, but yet we haven't been able to do the essential work to recognize their labor and their work and their toil and their sacrifice. We're at a time where many of our fields are going unharvested. It's known that we have these challenges. Food security in the United States is national security, but yet we have failed time and time again. This is an opportunity to bring justice to our farmers, for our farm workers, and for all those families during this inflationary period that are having a challenging time to put groceries on the table. Where I come from, we call ourselves the salad bowl of the country, if not the world. And we want to continue doing that and doing it productively and with the help of our farm workers. So with that, I just want to recognize you, Senator Bennet, all the stakeholders, the United Farm Workers, the Western Growers, the California Farm Bureau, others that have come together in an extraordinary way to ring the bell and say, we need to get this done now. We're at the end of an extraordinary opportunity that we have, and we can succeed if we just put politics aside and focus of what's in the best interest of our country. Thank you very much. I'm supposed to introduce someone else. I had a speech, but I thought I'd go without a speech. And now I want to, they call votes, and we got to go. But let me introduce Chuck Connor with the National Council for Food Cooperatives. Thank you very much. They called votes. Senators, we got to go.
All right, see you. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Thanks. Come over here.
Senator Bennet, thank you for the opportunity to participate in this important press conference, and thank you so much for your leadership on bringing us to this point in the Senate. American agriculture, ladies and gentlemen, is being threatened to its very core by labor shortages and skyrocketing labor costs. You simply cannot today call yourself a friend of the American farmer and not be involved in fixing this problem. The legislation being proposed by Senator Bennet is a compromise, but it represents a huge win for American agriculture with real and tangible help to the farmer, rancher, and grower. It should be passed immediately. Some say there will be opportunities to deal with ag, immigration, and labor issues in the next Congress or perhaps at a later time. This is wrong. A sharply divided Congress in the years ahead will not have the appetite to deal with this issue. No one from either side of the political aisle disagrees on the solution to this problem, or perhaps I should say virtually no one. Why wait, ladies and gentlemen? Do not delay the help for American agriculture. Act now to support us. Thank you. And I'm going to now introduce Teresa Romero, head of the United Farm Workers Union, and certainly our partner in coming to this compromise. Teresa.
Thank you. Thank you, Chuck. Good morning, and thank you all for being here today. I want to particularly thank Senator Bennet for his leadership. The United Farm Workers welcomes the introduction of this legislation and urges everyone on the Hill who cares about farm workers to work as hard as farm workers and turn it into law. This bipartisan compromise strengthens America's food security while honoring and rewarding the contributions of the farm workers who have already been living and working here for decades. Farm workers have made enormous concessions in this legislation in order to get to this point. This legislation creates a temporary, renewable legal status for farm workers who are already here in this short term with the opportunity and option to earn permanent legal status several years into the future. This is the very least we owe the hardworking men and women who break their backs every day to put food on our tables. In return, this legislation includes some very difficult provisions for us, provisions that we have opposed in the past and that we will continue to oppose should there be any attempt to move them separately. But we're here to say we are prepared to see this legislation through because it is the status quo of fear and exploitation that is the most intolerable for farm workers. Every day, farm workers endure while lacking the basic rights to know they will still be able to stay with their families. Tomorrow is a day too late. What we're proposing here should not be this complicated. It is a simple provision. If you work to feed America, you deserve the right to stay in America. This is a moment for action. Farm workers expect nothing less. Now, please allow me a moment to address workers directly. A los campesinos, quiero comunicarles que esta propuesta de ley no es perfecta. Se han tenido que hacer varios compromisos, algunos muy difíciles. Pero lo más importante es que esta ley significa una legalización para ustedes. Significa poder decir que pueden seguir trabajando y viviendo en los Estados Unidos sin miedo. Significa poder ir a visitar a sus familias en sus países de origen, con permiso para regresar. Significa poder eventualmente hacerse ciudadanos con los mismos derechos y protecciones de cualquier otro ciudadano. Y significa nuevas protecciones legales para trabajadores contratados. No acabará de un día al otro todos los problemas que enfrentamos, pero libraría a los campesinos sin papeles del silencio y el miedo que han vivido por demasiados años. Esta es nuestra oportunidad y vamos a pelear hasta el último minuto para lograrlo. Thank you, and let me introduce now Arturo Rodriguez, United Farm Workers President Emeritus.
Thank you very much, Teresa, United Farm Workers President, current President. It's an honor to be back here advocating for farm workers here in Washington yet again. When the pandemic hit, farm workers were told they were essential. While the rest of us got to stay home, farm workers kept going to work. You can't pick a potato over Zoom. Farm workers put themselves and their families at risk to keep America fed. And when farm workers did their work during the pandemic, they didn't ask if the food they were harvesting was going to be eaten by a Democrat or a Republican. They just went to work. Now it's time for Democrats and Republicans alike to go to work for them. Representatives Dan Newhouse, Zoe Lofgren, Salud Carvajal, Mike Simpson, they've done their work. Senator Bennet has done his work. What we need is some Republican senators now to do the work necessary to make this bill possible. Listen to the stories. It is now is the time. Many of us have been at this for a long time, Chuck, right? 22 years trying to get this legislation passed, and now I can say this is the closest we've ever been. So let's truly make this a season of celebration for everyone and ensure the passage of this legislation. Carlos Herrera Fabian will be our next speaker. He comes from the state of Florida, and he's also a member of the United Farm Workers Foundation. Carlos.
Good morning. My name is Carlos Herrera Fabian. I am currently a student at Michigan State University. I am the son of farm workers and the grandson of farm workers. I have worked in the farm fields since the age of 7. My mom has worked in the fields for 15 years, my father for 10 years, and my grandfather for nearly 50 years. Growing up, we migrated all along the East Coast, migrating between Delaware, Maine, North Carolina, and Florida. We picked cucumbers, sweet potatoes, peanuts, cotton, tobacco, corn, apples, peaches, asparagus, tomato, chili peppers, watermelons, oranges, blueberries, and even mandarins. We have contributed to the economy and food security of this nation. Life as an undocumented farm worker often means being threatened, silenced, and often exploited under the work conditions in which farm workers face. As a son of farm workers, I saw my parents break their skin, their backs, and mental health to give me and my siblings the bare necessities, all while making below average pay. In Florida, we picked oranges. Because of my mother's legal status at the time, she couldn't be eligible for child care programs. As a result of that, my mom took me into the fields at just the age of a toddler, laying me under the orange trees as she picked the oranges in the hot Florida summers. By the time I was 12, I spent all day clearing weeds under the orange trees with just a machete, squatting from sunrise to sunset, with the temperatures reaching easily over 100 degrees. In Maine, we picked apples. My mom is about 5 feet tall, weighing no more than 100 pounds. Climbing those 12-foot ladders, carrying 50 to 60 pounds of apples on her shoulders, that's half her body weight. Also, she could sacrifice her long-term health just to give us, her children, the bare necessities. Not only did my parents sacrifice a lot for me, but also for this nation. We are the reason why people have food on their tables and food in grocery store shelves. It's not fair to get treated without dignity. All we want is legalization, so we no longer have to live in the shadows and have that fear instilled in us. That's why I ask and urge you all to prioritize the legalization of farm workers. Thank you. And now I will introduce my colleague, Marisela Martinez Juarez, who is a farm worker from Georgia. And as well, I will also introduce Brian Pantoja, a son of farm workers who will be translating. Thank you.
Good morning. Good morning. My name is Brian. Thank you, Carlos, for introducing us. I'm a fellow Georgian here with Marisela, and I will be translating for her. I am a child of farm workers, and I have been a farm worker myself.
Buenos días, mi nombre es Marisela Juárez, vengo hoy del estado de Georgia.
Good morning. My name is Marisela Juarez. I'm here from the state of Georgia.
He estado aquí trabajando en la agricultura en Georgia por 15 años. Yo he piscado naranja, tomate, brócoli, cabbage, toronja, fresa, pis y papa, entre otras frutas y verduras.
I have worked in agriculture in Georgia for 15 years. I have harvested oranges, tomatoes, broccoli, cabbage, grapefruit, strawberries, peas, and potatoes, and various fruits and vegetables.
El trabajo es muy difícil. Uno trabaja desde temprano y regresa muy noche. Deja a sus hijos todo el día.
Our job is very difficult. We work early mornings to late at night, and we leave our children all day.
Cuando regresas, llegas cansado y tus hijos te quieren abrazar, pero a veces les dices, no me abraces, porque miren cómo estoy de sucia. Llegas a la casa cubierta de lodo, de tierra y químicos.
We come home very tired, and all our children want to do is hug us, but at times we have to say no because we are covered in dirt, mud, and pesticides.
Pero aunque es pesado, a mí sí me gusta hacerlo, porque sí me encanta verlo verde, estar al aire libre, y porque me gusta ver el producto, la fruta en la planta, se ve hermosa.
Even though our job is hard, I love doing it. I love seeing the green of our vegetables, breathing in the fresh air, and seeing our product grow, and seeing the plant grow, seeing the fruit grow from our plants.
Y sabemos que le va a dar de comer a la gente, a millones de gente que no conocemos, y así estamos conectados.
We know that we are feeding millions of people. Even though we don't know them, it's a way that we feel connected with them.
Si usted va a comer algo hoy, es gracias a los campesinos.
If you happen to eat anything today, it's thanks to farm workers.
Por eso yo creo que es justo que tengamos una legalización para que los que trabajan en el campo.
This is why I think it's just to have a legalization for farm workers.
Es muy difícil la vida sin papeles. Cuando yo necesitaba ir a cualquier sitio del trabajo, incluso simplemente a la escuela de mis niños, no podía.
It is very difficult to live a life as an undocumented person. Even if we needed to travel to a job site or even just take our kids to their school, we couldn't.
Porque no teníamos licencia. Las cosas más simples las tenemos que hacer viviendo con ese miedo.
We don't have licenses. Even the most simplest things we'd have to do in fear.
Siento que es muy importante que los trabajadores del campo puedan superarse para el bien de ellos y de sus hijos para todo este país.
I think it is very important for new opportunities to be presented to farm workers for the betterment of themselves, their children, and this country.
Mi esperanza es que esta propuesta de ley sí se haga realidad, para que todos los campesinos como yo tengan más oportunidades y podamos seguir aquí haciendo nuestro trabajo y viviendo con nuestras familias. Muchas gracias.
My hope is that this bill will become a reality so that many farm workers like me are presented with new opportunities and we can continue to work here, doing our job, and living with our families. Thank you. I will now present Rebecca Shee of the Executive Director of the American Business and Immigration Council. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Marcela. Good morning. My name is Rebecca Shee. I'm the Executive Director of the American Business Immigration Coalition. We are a bipartisan council of 1,200 employers across the country. I'm really sorry. A Big Action fully endorses Senator Bennett's bill, and we're so grateful to your leadership, and we're grateful to Congressman Newhouse and Simpson's valiant efforts in the House. One of our employers yesterday, he's a farmer from Kansas, told me, I need this bill because I have 20 workers, and this bill will save me $42,108 next year. I can keep my farm open, and this will also mean a lifeline for my workers. I trust my workers sometimes more than my children, and I give my keys to my workers when I'm on vacation, so they can also take care of my house. I have one worker that has been picking crops and taking care of my livestock for the last 20 years, and she hasn't gone home to see her family, and I like her to do that before she dies. In addition to these numbers that you see here, the net worth of American households took a 9% dip for the third consecutive quarter, hit by rising inflation and out-of-control food prices. There is a reason why the average American is angry at Congress. This bill, Senator Bennett's bill, cuts inflation, protects U.S. food security, gives farmers the workers they need, controls their costs, and farm workers' legal status, as well as a down payment on border security. Senator Bennet has put forward a solution that the Senate should have the courage to pass. Thank you. Oh, it is my pleasure to introduce the CEO of U.S. Apple, Jim Baer.
Thank you very much, and good morning. I'm Jim Baer. I'm the president and CEO of U.S. Apple Association. Thank you all for being here. The U.S. Apple industry, we harvest 25 billion apples a year in the United States, and every one of those apples has to be hand-picked. There are no robots to do that. Every one of those 25 billion apples is hand-picked. More than weather or markets, the number one issue in our industry is the lack of people to harvest those 25 billion apples. I meet with family farmers almost every day who tell me that they had to leave apples on the tree to rot because they couldn't get enough people to pick them. That's offensive to me. I think it's offensive to anybody that cares about hunger and adequate food supply in this country. I grew up on a farm, and my dad used to say, don't make any excuses. Don't tell me what you can't do. Show me what you can do. And thanks to the leadership of Senator Bennet, who refused to take an excuse and look the other way, thanks to him and to the gentleman who spoke earlier from the House of Representatives, they're showing us what they can do. We have a bill in the House. We now have a bill in the Senate. And the only thing left is for Mr. Bennett's colleagues to come together and show us what they can do. So I want to say thank you to the Senator and appreciate his very hard work and leadership on this.
Appreciate it. Thank you. You can't, I think I speak for Jim when I say you can't pick an apple on Zoom either. Is there anybody else, or is that?
A lot of people enjoy an apple.
Thank you. That's true. That's true. Oh, sorry. Yeah. Thank you. I apologize.
Thanks, Sam. I'm Cam Quarles. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of the National Potato Council. I can thank you, Arturo. I can confirm that you cannot pick a potato by Zoom. Potato is one of the most widely produced vegetables in the United States. We have production in Senator Bennett's state, in Mr. Valadeo's district, Mr. Newhouse's district, across the United States. And the single thing that we hear from producers in every single one of those growing areas is concerns about access to the most valuable piece of their business, which is their workers. I think Senator Bennet has created a path here where we could finally get to that solution that has been so elusive for so many of us who have worked so hard for getting on 2 decades now to finally come to some type of resolution of what is a growing crisis in U.S. agriculture. We're simply asking that leadership on both sides of the aisle provide the opportunity, the window to move something forward in this Congress that can finally get to the president's desk and start providing relief to all of the incredibly valuable farm workers as well as their employers across the United States. The time is really now. So thank you, Senator.
Thanks. Questions?
So thank you for holding this press conference, and we feel your passion for this cause that we've been talking about for so many years. Last year, we asked the president of the American Farm Bureau, Zippy about this issue and how I don't know that I can answer that question because nobody's been able to answer it for the last 30 years. So that's the question I'd like to ask is how do you disentangle this from the border security issue, which is so much of a hot potato, no pun intended, today. And why did you wait so late in the session, considering how difficult it is to get Republicans?
Well, Joe, I'm going to answer both those questions. The second question, we've been negotiating this bill for the last couple of years, and like as with many other pieces of legislation, the work is really done usually by a coalition of Americans. And in this case, we have a bipartisan, broad coalition of Americans who have been on both sides of this issue for many, many years, who have come together and said, this is the solution. And it is disappointing that we haven't been able to get a Republican in the Senate to act in a bipartisan way, the way the House Republicans that were here this morning have been able to do. But hope springs eternal, because time is not our ally here. And as Chuck Connor said, we're not going to get this passed when we have divided government. We can get this passed today, not in a partisan way, but in a bipartisan way, acting in the Senate and the House. And that's why we need to act now, I think. On the question of disentangling this from the border issues, we have to continue to work in good faith to try to solve all the immigration issues that our country is facing. I was part of the Gang of Eight in 2013 that wrote the bipartisan immigration bill that passed the Senate with 68 votes. I negotiated the agriculture provisions of that bill, and I gladly supported the $40 billion for border security that was in that bill, and hope that we can get to a comprehensive solution at some point. But in the meantime, we can't drive our family farms out of business, and that's what we're doing today. That is what we're doing today. And that's why it's so important for us to pass this legislation.
So you don't have a Senate Republican on this, despite all the time working with Senator Crapo. How do you expect to move it through the Senate? Have you gotten any
It's not. No, I have assurances from Senator Schumer that if we're able to get some Republican votes, we can pass this as part of the omnibus. And I know there are Republican senators that want to vote for this bill. The difficulty that we've had is disentangling the politics of the first question, and I think we have to set that politics aside if we're going to do the right thing for American agriculture. That's just the reality.
What is your pathway to 10 Republican senators to support? Who are you talking to? Who's on board?
I think this coalition is the pathway to that. I don't know if any of you would like to talk about any of the conversations you've been having.
We have spent months on negotiating and compromising. I think we need to look at this not just when we talk about the border and other immigration issues. It is too big, and we cannot handle it at once. Right now, we need to look at the workforce that exists here, the challenges that employers are having by not having the workforce that they need, and they are the backbone of agriculture. And I think people need to hear that. People need to understand that it's not a partisan thing. Like Arturo said, they fit both, the Democrats and Republicans.
But what Republicans understand the message that you are trying to get across?
Yes. Yes.
Chuck Connor, National Council of Farmer Co-ops. I will tell you, we have been in all of these offices, and when I say we, I mean the representatives of American agriculture. And there's many Republicans who would like to support this bill, and I think Senator Bennet has had conversations. He knows that, and the difficulty is getting over what we've talked about previously here. No secret that many of the big agricultural regions in this country are represented by Republicans in the Senate, and we're just making the case of what a big problem this is in American agriculture. We want to be around. We want family farmers to be around for a very, very long time. It's a great system, and this is probably one of the most difficult, if not the most difficult, threats that these family farmers have faced in generations. and we just continue to make the case to everybody, but certainly many of these Republican senators who represent agricultural regions in hopes that we can get them to step forward here and I think do what everyone acknowledges is the right thing. This is not really a policy debate. We may, argue over a number here and all this kind of thing, but generally this has been, fine-tuned over many, many months and in some cases years of negotiation, and everybody knows what the solution is. It's just a matter of stepping forward and doing it.
I'm going to take two more and then or three more, and then we'll go.
Sure. So you talk about, I'm curious if there at all any policy changes, what change that gives more appetite for Republican senators to join on? Is there something you can point to that makes you bring this up?
I would say the most important thing that has changed is the economics. There was $21 billion of savings for farmers in the House version of the bill, and the version of the bill that the farm workers have agreed to in the Senate produces another $2 billion of savings for farmers at a time when they desperately need it. That, I think, is really important.
Does the Farm Bureau support this bill? Does it fix some of those concerns? And where were you not able to, where were the most discerning disagreements, I guess, with Senator Crapo that he wasn't able to come to the table?
I will leave the answers to those questions to the Farm Bureau and Senator Crapo. Caitlin, do you get the last word?
This is actually more for the workers, and so some of you actually alluded to this, and it kind of tacked on the question. What are the compromises you think you guys made in this bill, and what are your red lines, and where do you think the other side, where should other people have to get?
We, I think as somebody have mentioned it before, we've been working on this for several years, and this bill includes things like farm workers who have been working in the fields and will continue working in the fields for several years to be able to get a path to legalization. We're going to have E-Verify. That is the first in the private industry. We're going to have a number of year-round H-2A workers or guest workers. So these are things that we have discussed through months and years. We got to an agreement, and this is something that, like I said earlier, it is going to save the agricultural industry in our country.
And I would just say, by way of closing, that people, as Teresa and Chuck both said, there are disagreements on every side of this issue, and you can find little things in the deal that maybe some people don't like. It is inarguable that passing this legislation will be better for American agriculture than not passing this legislation. It's inarguable that this will be better for family farms than not passing this legislation. It is inarguable that this will be better for farm workers if we pass this legislation than if we don't. And Congress will be on notice of all of those things as we go home for the holidays. And I hope there is something of a Christmas miracle here, and the people come together and pass this legislation, because the consequence of not passing it is going to be devastating for our country.
Can I just want to add one thing about the questions around Republicans and border security. I would say that is something that we're seeing as we're visiting employers with Republicans that is very attractive about this bill if you actually read the text. So this is a first serious effort to actually reduce the chaos at the border. I think Representative Dan Newhouse spoke to it earlier by increasing the legal channel. So the other major difference from the House bill is the increase in H-2A visas. And so that, we have farmers in Missouri that tells us, hey, those people at the border, can you have them come work on my farm? If they cross 7 countries, they should come and help me milk cows, right? But the reality is right now there isn't a legal an efficient pathway. So that's what this bill creates, is so that people don't have to come to the border. They can apply on an H-2A year-round visa, and it helps the farmers, it helps our rural communities, and it helps, the farm workers. So I think this is an actual real measure at reducing, the chaos at the border and border security. And the other measure that Republicans have said they liked is the mandatory E-Verify. This is going to be the first bill after passage, that will remove undocumented labor from an entire industry. And so this is an actual serious effort. So, and to Chuck's point, all the rural communities, we all say we want to fight for them, we hear them, but this is the actual bill that pays attention. Farmers say, if you look at this bill, it is good for me and it's good for our security. So thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks.